So do you think the definition of leadership has changed? Because what you described there, to me, sounds like a leader, but do we need to maybe define what a leader in today's world is?
I don't think anybody nowadays says, what you do for a living, I'm a leader. If you do, you'll probably be on a recent HR course. I think that, things have moved on. Right? I went into the 80s and the 90s when it was all about, reading the right books about leadership. Organizations have changed. Things work very fast. As individuals, we have to do an awful lot more. We have to have many more skills. There's no place nowadays for just being a leader. Each of us has to earn our keep in organizations. There's far more demanded of us than ever before. And we have the tools. So, those of you who think you're just going to be leaders and you're going to manage people are probably going to be quite disappointed.
And Tamara, from your point of view?
I think leadership, I agree, being a leader as a career is a tricky one, but I think that leadership is sort of a skill that is one muscle you can choose to develop or not be a leader and develop other ones. And I think you asked what are the most important things. I think it's different at different times, it's different to different companies, but there's a sort of underlying thread of a leader is that you're carrying along other people with you or you're motivating other people along a particular path. And to do that, I think the things that probably make the biggest difference in my company, certainly at the moment, are having resilience for the ups and downs. As a leader, you've got to kind of hold your mettle no matter what happens. And even if everybody else is panicked or flapping or there's something terrible happened, you've somehow got to find the right way through. And doing that and having the right resilience, not only to figure out in a business way what's the right answer, but your own energy and how you convey that is really important. And the other thing I think is communication. As a leader, you spend a lot of time making sure that, as I said, everyone's on the same path, but everyone knows what's going on at all times so they can be on that path. And that takes lots of talking, lots of repetition. I've spent a lot of my time repeating the same thing I said probably a few minutes ago. Sorry about that. But through the day so that people actually are all up to speed at all times. And then I think the final one I'd say is being really transparent as a leader. And that's maybe a personal one and different people take it differently. But I think if you're trying to get other people along on a certain journey, you've got to be really, really open about everything. So in my company, everything is shared. Nothing's a secret other than salaries. Everything else, every piece of data, whether it's good or bad or it's been a terrible month or an excellent month, that's all out there. And then that helps you get people's trust and buy-in to carry forward. That's personal attributes of what I think makes a good leader.
So I want to touch on resilience, because resilience is talked about quite a lot. From your personal experience, how do you build that resilience?
I think for me, it's been about developing a sort of internal barometer of what's a big deal versus a little deal. And that's only come over time. And as a consultant, I was able to see a lot of by nature of the job, you can see a lot of different projects, a lot of different experiences, and that helps you see what actually has an impact in the long term, what's actually a big deal for the long term versus what feels like a massive deal in the moment, but actually isn't. And it takes ages to calibrate this barometer and to deal with the fact that you can look at a situation and see, all right, we've got to fix this right now, but in the grand scheme of things, it's going to be okay. Or if I look at this, one of my mentors once told me, look at it, if anything really, really bothers you, think in 10 years' time, when I look back on this day, is it going to be, oh my gosh, it was that terrible day, or I don't even remember it. And setting things in perspective, I think, is one of the things, personally, that's really helped me manage my own resilience and your own energy. I think things go wrong all the time, particularly in a startup, like every single day, every single minute. And if things are going well, you're kind of waiting for the next thing to go wrong. So having that calibration has helped me.
I think calibration is very interesting and is also we're all on a journey in which we learn about ourselves, we learn about the things that really test our grit. And we also see people in very difficult situations. Back to Aon, this building. Aon Corporation's headquarters were in the States, and we were in the Twin Towers when the planes hit. And we, from this building, communicated with the people in the burning towers. And we, from this building, looked after an organisation that was shattered as a result of Y2K, as a result of the 9/11. And in those hours, when we managed the insurance industry and reacted to that crisis, I saw people with such grit and such resilience that anything else I do in my career will never, sort of test me as much as those people were tested in those hours. In the financial crisis, we had countries going into huge crisis. I stood on a platform over the road and talked to hundreds of people at RBS when the stock price fell, and those people had lost all their savings that they'd put into RBS stock, and they were nationalised. In a career, you go through huge amount of natural disasters and corporates failing, but nothing is painful as something hugely personal. And what I'm terribly impressed with entrepreneurs is that each and every day you go through such hell. I had 35 years working for big organizations in huge jobs, doing things that had great, great significance. And I thought I was really, really tough. But nothing requires resilience of being an entrepreneur, of having hundreds of people depending on you to actually go out and get the funding and make sure your business survives. So I have a huge amount of respect for entrepreneurs. And for 35 years in the corporate life, I had it really easy.
No, thanks for sharing that. On that note, it's because I recently went to a talk and I heard from a founder, and he's talking about his own sort of psychology and how important self-awareness is. And they actually opened up the group where people talked about how lonely it can be as a founder or as a CEO. From your experience, you talked about grit, and you talked about resilience, and you talked about transparency as well. How do you manage your own sort of psychology, your own sort of well-being?
I think there's a huge number of books written about startup life. And they all say that you've got to go running and look after your health and do all the right things. I do none of those. I work, all day long, every day of the week. And I love it all. But how do I look after my own psychology? How do I look after myself in the days that are not such good days? I think I'm kind to myself. I think I don't beat myself up when things go wrong. And I think women beat themselves up when things go wrong more than guys. So as us women in this room, we have to treat ourselves nicely. We're doing a really tough job, and we need to be kind to ourselves.
And so on that, Tamara, I remember hearing a talk about sort of the power of networks. How has that sort of impacted?
Yeah, I think networks and having a sort of personal board is something that I've talked a lot about with. Well, actually, I was going to say that's partly the answer with my circle of fellow founders. So I think this is it. over a long time, I figured out what actually really bothers me. And personally, if it's a business problem, it's okay. I can figure it out. We'll figure it out with my team. It doesn't shake me in the same way that a problem with people or with one of my team shakes me. And that's when I really need to rely on others to sort of help me hold things together. And those, for me, are the bad days with sort of people problems. How networks help is, I think there are different people that you want to have in your circle that you can go to for different things. Some of those are practical and some of those are emotional. And so, if you've got a problem with fundraising or something, then maybe there's a couple of people who you go to for advice on how to deal with that. But if you have a people problem that you want to talk through, I've got a couple of people who I know are really good at being able to talk that through, giving me the opposite opinion, helping come to a solution and that kind of thing. For some people it's a coach, for some people it's friends or partners or whatever it might be. But I think if you can figure out the things that bother you in your career or in a working week or so on, and figure out who are the people who can help you solve that, then that means you have those go-tos at the right moment. I think the other thing is just having circles who are going through the same thing. And so I've been really fortunate to have a circle of female founders who we all met about 3-4 years ago through one of the Silicon Valley Comes to UK trips, one of the Mayor's business program trips. There's 12 of us, and we met on that trip. We've all got companies in early to mid stages, and we have a WhatsApp group, and it's constant. It's every day with any kind of problem, a people problem, a partner problem, a co-founder problem, whatever it is. And then you've got that tribe who can help you through the time. So if you are starting off or you don't have that, I think London at this point is a really great place to find the right networks. Through programs like yours or whatever else it might be, it's out there. So if you don't have it, you can build that network.
Is it important to you both to have that network of other female sort of founders?
Yeah, I hadn't particularly thought so till I met my network of female founders. And I think there's the way we approach things, so you raised some things about how women approach it. There's things that scientifically just bond you together in the way you deal with business problems, or the way you deal with other people, or the way you interact, or your level of empathy, or all the things that people have written about. And I'm one for differences between men and women that are really fact-based and science-based and all of that. And I think when you look at what we get from our group as female founders, there is something that's bonding us together in our similarities to the way we approach and the way we react and the way we deal with things. And that's just helpful.
And from your point of view, would you like to add anything?
The stage of the business we're at and the sort of thing we're doing, there aren't many female founders, sort of in the realms I work in. In fintech, it's basically 30-year-old guys with beards. So I don't have many female founders that I can go for a drink with. But where do I go for advice? I'd like to sort of sound a word of warning, really, about a lot of the advisors that hang around the fintech scene or the startup scene. And I can say that because I'm a, 50-year-old sort of ex-corporate person. There's a lot of people that retire from corporate life and think it's really, really cool to hang around startups. And they think they know an awful lot about the industry and startups, and they haven't got a clue. So, make sure you don't take advice from them because they don't know how to start businesses. I was one of them once. I thought it was really, really cool to leave corporate life and help startups. And I was dangerous. It wasn't until I actually started my own startup, my own bank, that I knew, how this world works. So be skeptical. There's a lot of people going to give you advice. Make sure they actually know something before you take that advice from them. A 20-year-old that's had a startup is probably better off than a 50-year-old that's worked in a bank all their life, that thinks they know about banking, but things have moved on, a lot of what I thought was absolutely 100% right turned out to be 100% wrong.
Wow. Okay. Great. I'm going to go to Slido now and see which ones are the popular questions. So, how does leadership challenges change from being a startup to being a scaled business?
I started from, I thought the business is sort of growing to my level. I'd always sort of had, I got to a career and I was running sort of tens of thousands of people. Then all of a sudden I had to run one person. It was a bit of a shock. As Starling is now 500 people, is getting into my comfort zone. But we also see people at the other end who are trying to scale companies. Companies will grow through many versions of management team. As organizations grow, that management team will change several times. I read a lot of books, read high growth companies, read, The Hard Thing About Harder Things, read upstarts, read, whatever you can do about entrepreneurships or product management or starting businesses, read it. In order to survive this world, you need lots of data. You can pick things up, you can read it, you can reject it. But gather that data, create your own data set.
Just a follow-up question. Is there one book that you could recommend?
The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. That is the go-to book. I recently, I would have said that. I recently read Shoe Dog by Phil.
That's
Phil
absolutely brilliant.
And so that would be my second. And I think what stood out for that. What's that? Oh, that's your first choice. No, I mean both are fabulous, and The Hard Thing About Hard Things tells you all the lessons of, in hindsight, what you should do. The Shoe Dog was brilliant because it just showed you the long, long journey it takes to grow an amazing company and the ups and downs along the way and how you can go from the brink to the... So when we talked about resilience, the story of that is just amazing. And I loved how you go from one page to the next and it's sort of 4 years later this happened. And you're like, oh my God, my company's only 4 years old. I can't imagine that being a page in a book where you're like, 4 years later, Nike did this. But
the guy was about 21 when he went to sort of Tokyo and did a deal, sort of incredible. And that cinema where all these sort of Bill Gates and hangs out. Well, long story. But I love books, okay? And I read lots of books and look out for my book coming out on the 3rd of June, which is called The Money Revolution.
Wow. Is that an exclusive?
Yeah, I think I haven't. Yeah, so, 3rd of June.
Fantastic. We will definitely send, hopefully I'll get Marion. Marion, you need to send the link out to Anne's book. That's great. So moving on. Oh, hold on, let's jump in. How do you make sure you find the best? Tech talent is hugely spoken about. It's one thing whenever we do our C-suite roundtables, whether they're CFOs, CMOs, CPOs, they always talk about tech talent. So how do you go about finding the best tech talent? But it's not, for me, just finding. It's also then, onboarding. How do you, retain that talent as well?
I think finding it has been easier as we've got a bit bigger. I think I think there's things that everybody knows. It's hugely competitive in London. There's not enough for the number of startups. And so I think what's helped us a lot has been the mission. Excuse me. And sort of that's how we hire for everyone. But what we can offer is comparable on every other dimension. But if you want to come and work for somewhere which has got a really strong, heartfelt mission as well as a strong commercial goals, then that's how we've the tech talent that we have, we've brought them on board and retained them as well. I think because there's always great competing offers. I mean, for any developer, any product manager, anything, they can work. The world's an oyster. So what's got to hold you is feeling really passionate about what you're doing and seeing that you're building something that impacts other people's lives, if that's what drives you. And that's the kind of people that we've we've tried to get. It's hard though. I mean, and as we scale, I think we're going to have to look at other solutions like maybe overseas or outsourcing or whatever. But for now, having an in-house team of really driven people who believe the mission is what we've relied on.
I was a computer scientist, a graduate computer scientist that started off as a software engineer. And I think this code I actually wrote myself still 40 years ago, well, 35 years ago in some of the big banks. Engineers, software engineers, love working in organizations that respect software engineering. At Starling Bank, we are very much engineering-led. We believe that technology can change people's experience of their financial life. And we believe that great technology is hugely differentiating. And therefore, we pay engineers well, we respect them, they lead, and it's what Starling's all about. The world of technology has gone through certain phases. In the 80s, the coders sat next to the business people. And then through several years, 20 years, 30 years, it offshored it, they'd outsourced it, they'd put more and more people between the people who wanted technology and delivered technology. We're now bringing it together. And we've got a very, very exciting time where software engineers are really at the forefront of organizations. And you have to demonstrate your respect of engineering if you're going to hire good engineers.
Okay, thank you. So I asked at the beginning who's looking to start their own business or is making that transition. So there's a question in terms of co-founders. And would you, just to confirm, do you have co-founders?
No, I don't.
No. Would you, when you were going through the process of setting up your businesses, is that an option that you looked at?
Yeah, I definitely thought about it, and then I thought I'll sort it out later, and then I never did. So that was basically, I don't think I thought enough at the beginning about the value of a co-founder and made it a conscious decision. It was more, lots of other companies do, but so it's something I think it's really hard to hire for any later than in the beginning. But there's pros and cons. I think the pros are obviously what we talked about earlier. That resilience and that solidarity comes from right next to you every day. And that's great. And if you have a co-founder with different strengths, I think the best pairings I've seen is where you don't have the same skills. So I think that's really important, is that you don't tread on each other's toes. If I was doing this again, I'd look for maybe a technical co-founder or someone who doesn't have the skills I have. And then they're right there and you can go through everything together. I think the important things I've seen that have made it work is having really clear decision-making processes and things like that. I think the other side of it is I've had lots of friends who've had bad co-founder relationships, and that's taken a real toll on their company and their own personal stress and so on. And so that's the only upside I can think of. You don't get into the equal situations which people don't hear about as much. But I think for someone to rely on, talk through all the decisions, particularly if you complement each other, I think that's hugely valuable. Next time I would think about that.
Oh, you would?
I would,
okay.
Yeah.
So you talked about decision making. I'm scared to say the word leader now, but maybe we shouldn't have called it the do's and don'ts of leadership.
Yeah.
But decision making can be very tough, especially when you're scaling a business. I'm only guessing from a founder or a CEO's perspective. There's a lot of decisions that need to be made very quickly. Do you have any tips on decision making?
Most answers to a decision are either 96% right, 98% right, 97% right. People take far too long to decide between very similar and very right outcomes. Get on, you're running a startup, make a decision, move on. Don't finesse the detail. Getting something that's 97% right rather than 96% right is not something you should worry about.
Okay. And the art of letting go, has that been a challenge for you, or how has that changed, from the start of your journey as to in comparison to where you are now?
I don't think you can ever let go. I think that you can be very good at running organisations. I think the one thing you must do is be the person that changes your organisation when that organisation shape is out of date. From starting the organisation to going through the various stages and scaling up, that organisation will have to reform and reorganise. And people tend to stick in those roles and be comfortable in those roles. It's only you, as the entrepreneur, the founder, that can say, no, that was great last month or last year. That was what I wanted you to do last month. But now we're different, and new things apply. So you can leave go, you can let people get on with things, you can get them into their positions and doing a good job. But it's the founder, it's the entrepreneur that has to shake things up and say, okay, we're a bigger company now, we have to be different.
And how do you do that forward thinking? How do you have your eye on almost the prize, but make sure everything is running at the same time?
I think there's different kinds of forward thinking. I think there's the one, I completely agree with what you said, Anne, and the only way I would know to learn that is to look at companies that are slightly ahead of me and see what they've been doing, and then think, hang on, we're not there. We're about to be there. Here are the potholes they fell in, and then that comes back to networks and having enough companies to keep an eye on. And I think unless you do that, it's very hard to know what the future looks like.
I think you have to, we have to work on a different time horizon. You constantly need to be looking out to what the organisation is going to be looking like in the future. You need to be spotting the challenges and the bottlenecks and the problems that you'll have when you achieve the goals you've already set. And keeping looking ahead, trying to figure out what's going to happen. There's sort of some people in my team say, yeah, and sees into the future and tries working in the problems that we're going to have, right, before we get them. So the leaders have to be the front runners and actually have to see where the organisation is going, and let everybody, in your organisation, manage on the shorter term.
Thank you. So I'm going to go back to the question, does leadership have to come natural, or can one learn it?
You can learn everything.
I think you can learn it.
Read and read again. I read in my 20s and 30s, I'd literally read hundreds of books. I'd go to a bookshop and I'd buy everything and read it. Some of it would stick. Some of it, I didn't have enough leadership experience or management experience to understand the nuances. But you have to be hungry for knowledge. Don't expect it just to come to you. Go out there and test it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think also leadership is not like a mystical sense that you have. There's just really practical things that leaders need to do. And it can come from a book. It can come from copying the bits of other leaders that you really like. There's a question about role models. I mean, I think if you either have one, or what I do is, I don't know if I could name one, but I read a lot about what other leaders do in like these articles that profile people, and they all have loads of tips about this is how I run my team, or this is what was really important to me when we were 20 people or 10 people or something like that, and just trying to kind of harvest all these tips and then put them, the ones that resonate with you, you put them into practice. The more you do that, the more it becomes your leadership style, and so you sort of build up your own way of being a leader from lots of other places. But it's really practical things. It's how to talk to a team, how to look forward and make decisions, what your daily routine is like, whether you get up at 4 and take cold showers or whatever it is. That's what different leaders do, different things to manage themselves and other people. And you can just get that and build your own style. So totally you can learn it.
Does that morning routine question, is that helpful? Because I see that a lot.
It's such a personal, it's such a personal decision what your morning routine looks like. And then there's the cool routine of whatever it happens to be of the year. I just read about someone who was up and taking ice baths, and that was the way apparently to run your day. But
I get up really early. I come into the city and I find somewhere, a coffee shop, whatever, quiet to work until 8 o'clock. And I've always done it. And that's my chance of doing the most creative things, actually. Sorry? I'm up about 5.
I'm not. I try that for periods of time where I think I should be up at 5 because that's others are. But no.
Yeah, but most people get up at 5 and go running, okay? I come up at 5 and come into the city where I feel very comfortable and I love what's going on here. It's my time to enjoy the city.
Fantastic.
Late.
Yeah. So we've got about 5 minutes left, so do get any questions in. I just wanted to ask a question about, so we're talking about leaders, leadership, but, both of you have made a real dent in the market of, whether it's or fintech or care, if that's the right industry term to use. How does a company become a leader in their market?
I think lots of people set out to be the leader. I think it's a question of survival, and a bit of luck, and a lot of resilience, and setting audacious goals, and just keeping on going. It's building these businesses really, really tough. And it's all about resilience.
I think being a leader in the market doesn't mean being the biggest or the most profitable, the most customers or something like that. For me, it's that you kind of achieve what you wanted to for your own community, and you could be number 2 or 3 or 4 in your market, but the people who are your customers or community find you the best, and then I think you're sort of a leader in that way. Because otherwise everyone's just striving for sort of, I don't know, the financial goals of the size or something like that, but that's not it for me.
So there's some questions about challenges. So can you please detail the challenges you faced in your initial days and how you overcame them?
I took 2 years to raise money. So in January 2014, I'd quit my job to start a bank. I was totally disillusioned about the industry trying to put things back together again, post-financial crisis the way it was before, and I knew that technology could change an industry. So I came back to London in January 2014 to start a bank. And I spent my whole career working in big banks, and I thought I was going to raise 300 million, and it was going to be easy. I'm going to do it in a week. And I started knocking on doors and trying to explain what I was going to do. I was going to start a new bank with new technology, written from scratch, have a full banking license, be the 13th members of Faster Payments in the UK, expand internationally, support large organisations, government, and fintechs, as well as providing a retail and SME proposition. And I wasn't going to make any money. I wasn't going to break even for about 5 years. And I needed 2 years to get the banking license before I could launch a product. And guess what? Nobody would give me any money. But in 2 years, I managed to work with a bunch of people who gave up their jobs to work with me on the vision. And I'm forever grateful for those people who bought the vision and joined. I'm also very grateful to the companies who put it to their boards that one day this would happen and they were going to support me. And 2 years into the initiative, when I'd almost got the banking license and I'd never raised any money whatsoever and was spending a huge amount of my own money, I raised a seed round of £48 million. I'd wish I'd got 50,000, then 100,000, then £1 million, but my first investment round was 48 million. So the first 2 years were pretty horrible, but then raising the money, there's a huge obligation to deliver. And in those first 2 years, I had hundreds of meetings and hundreds of people telling me that the plan was too audacious and we'd never deliver it. And I'm very grateful to the person who heard about what I was talking about and read about it in a newspaper and set out to find me.
Brilliant. And Tamara, from your point of view, what were the challenges?
I'll say a different one. Fundraising would echo that. The hiring your first people, I think, hiring my first people was probably one of the hardest things. Figuring out you don't have enough money to hire people, but you need people who will help you get off the ground, and that's people who will be really excited, don't mind that it's just you and them and maybe a couple of others. But the skills you need mean they've probably been working in places with far greater infrastructure. And I think that the balance of who to hire, how to find them, how to get them, all with limited resource, and doing it all yourself while you're trying to get the business off the ground was really, really hard. And I think probably our best early people were the ones who were just excited. They were just excited, and it almost didn't matter the skills. If I was doing it again, I would look for just some excited, positive people who will think, oh, that's a really cool thing. Maybe I can see if it will happen. I'll give it a couple of years. And that's all that matters at the beginning. And then 2 years later, you can find the people with the great skills in particular. You know what you need then, whether it's a great digital marketer or a great product person. But at the beginning, just excited hands.
Wow, okay. So I think I think we've answered those. And it's 7:30. Oh no, let's just one more question on burnout. So the person has said, you said you work ridiculously hard. Other than loving your work, how do you make sure you don't burn out?
There's an awful lot written about burnout and entrepreneurs and how you manage yourself, whatever. And I go back to what I said earlier on. You have to be nice to yourself. You have to appreciate what you're doing is something that's very important and really, really hard. And when you have a really, really bad day, don't blame yourself. Blame the system.
I think that sort of the concept of work-life balance really means different things for different people. And for me, I worked a lot more hours. I worked many more hours a few years ago than I do now, and it's not because I love my work less, it's just what I find works for me right now. And then I think it's about setting the rules that work for you in a particular period of your life. So I didn't have as strong rules probably 10 years ago about when I do and don't work. What I really try to do now, and again, this is super personal, so on a weekend, on a Saturday, from a Friday night to like Sunday morning, I don't do anything to do with work. And I need that at the end of a week. It's tough, and then I need to know that I have that sort of clear space, and I just do all the other things I want to do. And then it also helps calibrate, again that word, what is a big deal to actually address at a weekend. So something that seemed a massive problem on a Friday night that really needed sorting out and I was going to have to spend hours on, by Sunday I'm like, is that really what I need to spend today on? And no, it sets it in perspective. That really works for me. And I just have other rules that work for me about exercising, about spending time with loved ones and things like that help, maybe because that's the way my mind works. If I can see that I have those times in the week that I do those things, then I feel that I've got the right balance for myself. That's it.
Brilliant. Well, look, Anne and Tamara, thank you so much for being very candid and, just sharing your stories. I hope you have found that very beneficial. So could we have a round of applause for Anne and Tamara?